I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Market News, here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending May the 23rd. We had calves and yearlings once again selling firm to $5 higher. A lot of spots as much as $10 higher quoted around. Not just on those pee-wee little calves under 450 pounds, but also in a lot of places on feeder steers weighing 600 to 850 pounds. Just pure demand from feedlots coming in trying to buy some more of those cattle up. But we've got a runaway feeder cattle market right now, calves and yearlings both, just anything, cripples, bad eyes, ugly ones, colored up, anything that will feed is bringing a handsome price. You go to a lot of sales that don't have a lot of heavy cattle, and you may not even see any cattle quoted, less than $2 a pound. And we're just we really don't see any signs of it backing off right now, because there's just not anything to stop it, because the numbers are so light that and everybody knows it, that there's just anything to feed that will make a beef is really selling at a high price. You got these northern plains buyers coming down from Nebraska and Iowa and the Dakotas and places like that, and they can take some of those southern cattle up north to feed. There's just not any sales. There's not any cattle moving in the northern plains right now. You might have one sale a month, and maybe not even that, and it may not have enough cattle to make a load. But when they do have a sale, like they did last Friday at Harriet, South Dakota, then you can see what happens. They had over 8,000 head up there at the Harriet Livestock Market, and included in those, they had a load of drug-free steers weighing 836 at 199 and a quarter, and another load drug-free steers weighing 873 at 195.75. So you can see what happens when they do get some local cattle, but they're having to send their orders, or they're having to pack their bags and head south to try to find some cattle. Luckily, they're finding some cattle in the lower Midwest right there. Your high volume cattle auctions are having big sales, even though our numbers are so tight. Last Friday at Woodward, they had 10,000 head of cattle. Oklahoma City National Stockyards had 11,700 on Monday. OKC West had over 9,000 on Wednesday. You go up I-44 there to Joplin on Monday, they had 6,500 head, but not as big a run as those other places, but that was 2,000 more than they were expecting. At 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you look out and they've got pots lined up to the interstate. And people are just taking advantage of this market and selling their cattle. They're beating the bushes and dragging everything they can find to town. And some people might look at those big numbers of at the feeder cattle auctions, those high volume markets, and think, well, when the market gets high, there'll always be cattle show up, and the cattle will just come out of the woodwork, and we're not that low on numbers. But that's not true. This is really just a precursor to how tight things are going to get down the road, because we've just been selling huge percentages of really lightweight calves ever since the first of the year. And so those calves are gone now, and especially the last 2 or 3 months, you haven't seen local backgrounders or grazers sitting in there buying those calves because they think they're too high. And so they haven't been getting in on those, and there's not that many cattle being backgrounded out in the country. The lion's share of these lightweight calves have been sold in these cattle auctions all winter and spring. The lion's share of them are going into vertically integrated systems, big corporate outfits that knew how tight numbers were going to be. They've got number crunchers that have told them how it was going to be. This is not a big surprise to them, and they have loads and loads of lightweight calves, either sitting in a growing yard, or if they were able to find some grazing for them. But those cattle are tied up. They're not going to be for sale anymore. They're not going to show up on the market in late summer or early fall to be bid upon. So the cattle that are in loose hands, that are still for sale, that are gonna be sold here in the late summer if they're coming off double stock pastures in the Flint Hills, or in early fall if they're coming off other traditional type grazing operations, the demand for those cattle is going to be even more than it is right now, if you can believe that. But these grazers that do have cattle turned out in the major grazing areas, and I'm talking about the ones that are in close proximity to the 5-area feeding district. You know, we're not talking about somewhere way off in Indiana or somewhere where there's not as much demand. We're talking about the Flint Hills, we're talking about the Osage, we're talking about the foothills of the Rockies, those places that are really adjacent to the 5-area feeding region. If there's guys that have cattle still for sale, I mean, they haven't been already contracted, haven't been sold on the video or anything. If those cattle are still for sale for late summer or fall delivery, these guys have got dollar signs in their eyes, and the dollar signs have the number 2 next to them. That's what everybody's thinking. They want $2 for an 800-pound steer coming off grass, either late summer or early fall. It's not happening yet. These feedlots love those cattle. Those cattle will gain their heads off and really perform in the feedlot, and they're going to fight over them, and they're burning the roads up in Kansas and Oklahoma and places like that looking for those cattle and trying to ride them up, but they're not ready to give $2 yet. They're not even ready to give $1.94 like the board quotes yet. But they are starting to give $1.90 around. And you know, these cattle will be selling in the low 90s. They're starting to fall now, and then they'll start tumbling here over the next several weeks as guys that still have them for sale. They don't really want to miss the boat, and they're making so much money on those cattle at $1.90 that they can't believe it anyway, especially those guys that bought their stocker cattle early. Really making a lot of money on those cattle, and those cattle are gaining really good out there. They've had just enough grass to keep plenty to eat, but not so much that grass gets washy and goes right through them. But the fat cattle market is not keeping up. These cattle feeders are going to be right back in the same shape if they don't watch it. They've been making some good money here the last few months, but they're starting to get to the point now they're giving so much for these feeder cattle that there's no way that they're going to get enough for their fed cattle to make it work. The Southern Plains lost another $1 this week, selling at $1.44. And you know, cost of gains are relatively cheap, and a pound of steer or heifer is really high, but still you can only back those cattle up so much. It's going to be hard to back $2 cattle or $190 cattle to back them all the way into the 140s. It's going to be hard to do that. But we're recording this a little bit early because I'm taking a little trip over the Memorial Day weekend. We don't have your regional weighted averages on the video. You can find those at our website, which you need to check out at marketnews.usda.gov. And from the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.